YouTube, what is good? It's your man Ribs from Doing Film Things. Every single week I drop a new video about film photography, so if that's your thing, definitely go ahead and subscribe. So as you already know, I've been messing around a lot with Vision3 film, and I've just been kind of obsessive about comparing it to some of the other products that are out there. So this time we're going to be talking about Vision3 500T and compare that to the Cinestill 800T. These are both the same raw product, so I think there's a fair comparison here. I tried to do this once before and I ruined the whole thing because my 500T film, I developed it with bad developer and basically wiped out the entire film. This time around, spoiler alert, everything worked out just fine, so I'm happy to finally be bringing you this video. Before we talk about anything with regards to the film, let's actually take a look at some photos and see how they compare. I'm purposefully not gonna label these photos so you can decide which one you think is which. And it will be consistent. The photos on the left will always be the same stock, and then the photos on the right will always be the same film stock. Let's check them out.
Oh, easy peasy, man. So easy. Look at that. Oh, look at that. I love that. Easy peasy. I don't have to do anything. I can't fuck it up. Oh, look at that. 38 photos. 38? What? You got 38, man. And of course we got Cinestill here. Cinestill. And then same thing, you know? Take two, right? Nice and easy. Yeah, so hopefully I don't ruin everything this time because last week, yeah. I messed up the 500T when I was developing it, so lost all those photos, but here we go. Look at that. Ready to go, number one. All right, I hope I don't screw this up. Let's do it. Stay tuned for the end of the video.
Man, I was sweating under there. I was like, fuck, I gotta get out.
Yeah. I didn't fuck it up. Damn, this is so good. It's portrait time.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you nighttime photographer boy.
Yeah. This is like photography gold right here.
Yeah, man.
You got some nice lights and colors and shit. I'm gonna take a lot of photos here. Oh, are you trying to model? Oh,
I was gonna touch it, then my brain went.
nah, you probably don't want to touch that phone. See that building right there?
That's a claim. It is so good.
I hope that comes out really nice on the Cinestill or on the 500T. We'll see.
Pepperoni?
We got pepperoni and margarita slices.
Grab me a pepperoni, please.
Oh,
That's all right.
I'm like, why you give it just to this? I know, it's a free thing. Like,
We don't realize that's actually moonshine.
I was like,
It's good?
She like the way that I move. She like the way that I roll.
this is where the party's at, man.
That's it.
Yeah, see, we should post up here all night.
It's just free.
So before we go any further, I want you to comment down below and tell me which one you think is which. Is the left side Cinestill or is the left side 500T? Let me know. So I think overall I don't see a massive difference between the two films. And honestly that makes sense because they're technically the same film. However, there's definitely some key things that you can tell when you do a side-to-side comparison. I think one of the most obvious things you can see is shadow detail. So for example, on the Cinestill version of the photo, you'll see the shadows are a bit darker, kind of overall more contrasty. On the 500T version of the same photo, you see so much more detail in the dark areas of the image. And I think this is pretty interesting because Before shooting any 500T, I never really considered that Cinestill was too contrasty, but when you compare it to the 500T version, you can definitely see a difference there. It's almost as if the Cinestill version is a edited version of the 500T. So if you were to take 500T, throw it in Lightroom, do some messing around with the sliders, I feel like that's what you would end up with, is what the Cinestill delivers. I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting way to think about it. The other thing that's evident is just more about the colors. The colors generally I think are fairly similar. However, because of that contrast that's added to the image on the Cinestill image, the colors perhaps pop just a bit more, especially when you have colors and highlights. So neon signs, for example, just punch a bit harder on the Cinestill versus the 500T. So aside from those two things, I really didn't see any other obvious differences in how the images look. The colors are very similar, the temperature is always the same, and the overall look kind of just feels very, very similar if you can kind of disregard that contrast. But for the most part, I don't see a massive difference between the two film stocks. I definitely wasn't expecting this like big kind of aha of how different they were, but you know, you can definitely see that there's some differences here, but overall they're pretty much very, very similar. So given that they're very similar, aside from these kind of specific details, you know, what's going on here? Why are there some differences given that they're the same base film? Well, I think there's two key variables here. Number one is processing. So of course, Cinestill is sold as film to be processed in C41. And then 500T is specifically designed to be processed in ECN2. So that distinction I think will make all the difference. Cinestill technically is being cross-processed since the base film is not intended for C41. Thus, I think that's where you get some of that character that Cinestill has. The extra contrast, the kind of the lower shadow detail, and perhaps even just a bit more grain. I think that all comes from the fact that you're processing in C41, and that's not the kind of original intended processing for that film. With the 500T film, of course, that's being processed in ECN2, which is the design process, and I think that's why you get that full kind of dynamic range. You can really, really see lots of detail in the shadows, and the highlights are very resilient and don't blow out that easily. So overall, I think processing is making all the difference here. And I chose to process each one as per the instructions by the seller, because ultimately I feel like that's how most people will be processing these films. So I wanted to see quote unquote the best version of Cinestill and then the best version of 500T and compare those to see how they fared against each other. Perhaps in the future I might process both in C41 or process both in ECN2 and see how it goes. The other key detail here is the remjet. And of course everybody talks about the remjet and everybody thinks that that's basically the only thing that's going on here. I don't know if it's the only thing going on, but I think it's definitely a very, very important thing. And I think there's two reasons why the remjet is kind of very important. I actually talked to one of the founders of Cinestill, and we had a discussion about kind of what's going on. And I think there were two key points that he mentioned. One is the fact that the remjet is being removed before you expose the film. That is pretty interesting, given that when you buy Cinestill, you don't have to deal with the remjet ever because it's already gone. If you shoot 500T, you're not only shooting and exposing the film with the remjet on there, but then of course you have to deal with it after during processing. So that's a key variable that you should definitely consider. The other thing is the how. So for example, Cinestill has their own proprietary method of removing the remjet, which they believe makes the film much more suitable for C41 and also allows it to print very well, as I've noted in the past. In terms of the how for the ECN2 process, there is a pre-bath, but you can also kind of hack the pre-bath yourself via some of the easy recipes online. But the point is, you're doing that potentially in a very different way than Cinestill does it. We don't know how Cinestill does it, but that's basically where all the magic is. I'm no scientist, and of course this isn't a very scientific experiment, so I'm gonna let you decide how much that matters, but basically I think those are the key details there, is processing, and then of course the remjet removal. You already know how much I love printing Cinestill, so actually click on this link right here to check out some of my favorite images that I've printed in my darkroom at home. So I think the dynamic range issue is also very evident in printing. The Cinestill image right here versus the 500T image here, you can very, very quickly see the difference in the shadow detail. One just simply has way more going on than the other. I don't think this is a bad thing per se, because for printing, contrast is very hard to control. So the fact that Cinestill gives you lots of contrast right out of the box, I actually think is a really, really good thing, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to control it. And I do find that sometimes I wish I could add more contrast to my prints, and the Cinestill one gives you that right out of the box. I think that's actually why I really love printing Cinestill, because especially for night scenes with those beautiful neon lights and lots of colored lights, the contrast just looks amazing if you find a properly lit scene. If you go somewhere that's very dark, you're probably not gonna get a great print. So I think I still prefer Cinestill in this situation, and I think for me, that's gonna be one of the main reasons why I continue to shoot Cinestill in the future, because I just know how beautifully it prints when you have a really, really nice image. So those are the differences between the film. At least those are the things that I could find. I'm curious, how much does this mean to you? Will this help you decide whether to shoot one or the other? I still think each one does have its kind of advantages, and therefore there are specific situations where I personally would shoot Cinestill, and then other situations where I think it's better for me to shoot the 500T. Ultimately, those variables kind of play a role in how I decide which one to buy and to use. Nonetheless though, both will no question remain in my film arsenal, as I think they're both fantastic products, and they both fulfill some of the needs that I have when it comes to nighttime shooting. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and leave me a like, as it really, really makes a difference for me. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. What are you waiting for? Until the next video, y'all. Peace.